The great council chamber stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal floor. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their designated areas, each breathing their preferred atmosphere through personal life support systems. Some floated in water-filled tanks, others hung from the ceiling in energy webs, and a few existed as pure light that danced between specially designed prisms. Ambassador Zektar of the Hegemony Coalition stood at the center podium, his 4 arms, gesturing as he spoke. His reptilian features showed deep concern as he addressed the assembled delegates. For 6 months, his intelligence teams had been watching the newest species to join galactic civilization, the humans from a small blue world called Earth. "Honorable delegates," Zektar began, his voice translated into 47 different languages simultaneously. "I stand before you today with a warning that I pray you will heed. The species known as humans presents a danger unlike any we have encountered in our recorded history." A few delegates shifted in their seats. The crystalline Vexani chimed their skepticism through harmonic vibrations. The aquatic Mirthul released bubbles of doubt into their breathing apparatus. Only the ancient energy beings called Lumhari remained silent, their light patterns unreadable. Zektar activated a holographic display. Images of Earth appeared above the assembly, a world of blue oceans, green continents, and white clouds. It looked peaceful, almost primitive compared to the advanced worlds of the galactic community. 7 billion humans inhabit this single planet, Zektar continued. They have not yet achieved faster-than-light travel. Their most advanced weapons are chemical explosives and nuclear devices. By every measurement we use to evaluate species development, they should pose no threat to any of us. Commander Thakris of the Chronal Empire interrupted with a harsh laugh. The massive warrior stood, nearly 10 feet tall, his exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights. "Then why are we wasting time discussing them? If they are so primitive, they will serve well under proper guidance." "That is exactly the attitude I fear will lead to disaster," Zektar replied. "Please, allow me to present my findings." The holographic display changed, showing recordings of human activities. The delegates watched as humans engaged in what appeared to be recreational combat sports, competitive games involving strategy and violence, and entertainment media filled with warfare and conflict. At first glance, these appear to be normal, cultural activities, Zektar explained. But observe more closely. In every aspect of human society, they demonstrate an unusual relationship with violence and conflict. They do not simply fight when necessary. They practice fighting constantly, as if preparing for wars that may never come. The display showed human children playing with toy weapons, human adults engaging in competitive sports that simulated combat, and human entertainment that glorified warfare and conflict resolution through violence. Furthermore, Zektar continued, humans possess a disturbing ability to weaponize anything they encounter. During our cultural exchange missions, we provided them with various items from our civilizations. Observe what happened. The holographic display showed security footage from the exchange missions. Human scientists examined a Vexani crystal resonator intended for meditation and communication. Within hours, they had modified it into a device that could shatter stone walls. A Mirthul water purification system became a chemical weapon delivery mechanism. Even a simple Lumhari light sculpture was converted into a blinding flash device. In every case, Zektar said, their first question was not, "How does this work?" or "What is its cultural significance?" Their first question was invariably, "Can this be used as a weapon?" Commander Thakris scoffed. "Primitive thinking from a primitive species. Any weapon they could create from our cast-offs would be useless against proper military technology." "That misses the point entirely," Zektar warned. "The issue is not the effectiveness of their weapons, but their mindset. Every human appears to be constantly evaluating their environment for tactical advantages. They look at a chair and see a shield or a club. They look at a cooking implement and see a blade. They look at their own waste products and see chemical weapons." This last comment caused an uproar among several delegates. The Vexani's chimes became discordant with disgust, while the Mirthul released clouds of shocked bubbles. Surely that is an exaggeration, called out Senator Vexani Prime. Through harmonic translations. I wish it were, Zektar replied grimly. Human military history shows extensive use of biological warfare using their own bodily waste. They have weaponized diseases, parasites, and even their own dead bodies. They appear to have no natural inhibition when it comes to using any available resource as a weapon. The display showed more examples. Humans using musical instruments as clubs, converting farming equipment into weapons, and turning children's toys into projectiles. Each example was accompanied by historical documentation showing how humans had actually used these techniques in warfare. Most disturbing of all, Zektar continued, is their response to superior force. Most civilized species, when confronted with overwhelming opposition, will negotiate, surrender, or retreat to fight another day. Humans appear to have a fundamentally different response to hopeless situations. The holographic display showed historical footage of human conflicts. Delegates watched in horrified fascination as human forces continued fighting, even when victory was impossible, often choosing to destroy themselves rather than submit to enemy control. They have a concept called going down fighting, Zektar explained. When faced with certain defeat, many humans will choose to inflict as much damage as possible on their enemies before dying. They appear to view death as preferable to subjugation. The ancient Lumhari finally spoke, their words appearing as patterns of light that were translated for the other delegates. This is concerning behavior. Species that cannot accept defeat often become problems for the entire galactic community. Exactly, Zektar agreed. Which is why I strongly recommend that we implement a century-long observation period before making any contact beyond simple cultural exchanges. We need to understand their psychology better before we invite them into galactic civilization. Commander Thakris stood again, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. I have heard enough of this fearful speculation. The Hegemony Coalition seeks to claim the human system for our own purposes, and I see no reason to delay. One primitive world against our combined fleets. The outcome is not in question. Several other delegates voiced agreement. The younger, more aggressive species saw Earth as an opportunity for expansion and resource acquisition. The humans' single world contained rare minerals and occupied a strategically valuable position near several important trade routes. You are making a catastrophic mistake, Zektar warned, but his voice was drowned out by the growing chorus of support for immediate action. The vote was called. 47 species voted on humanity's fate. 26 voted for immediate integration under coalition guidance, which meant military conquest followed by occupation. 18 voted for Zektar's recommendation of extended observation. 3 abstained. As the voting concluded, Zektar made one final plea. Honored delegates, I have spent my entire career studying emerging species. I have never encountered a species like humanity. They are not just another primitive civilization waiting to be guided into galactic society. They are something new, something we do not understand. Please reconsider this decision. Commander Thakris approached the podium with confident steps. Ambassador Zektar, your concern for protocol is admirable but unnecessary. The coalition has voted. The human system will be integrated within the next solar cycle. I personally guarantee that any resistance will be brief and minimal. 3 major powers formed the invasion coalition that day: the Chronal Empire, the Scythic Confederation, and the Vorthon Republic. Together, they commanded fleets that had conquered dozens of worlds. Their combined forces had never faced defeat in 3,000 years of expansion. As the council session ended and delegates began to disperse, Zektar remained at the podium, staring at the still active holographic display showing Earth. The blue world looked so peaceful, so harmless. But in his long experience, the most dangerous things often appeared harmless until it was too late. Within 1 month, 10,000 ships would depart for the human system. Zektar could only hope that his fears would prove unfounded, but deep in his heart he knew they would not. The die was cast. Humanity would face its first test as a galactic species far sooner than anyone expected. Admiral Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Krenorian Dominance, and watched the blue world grow larger on his display screens. Around him, the largest invasion fleet in galactic history moved through space like a metal storm. 10,000 ships of various sizes and purposes stretched across space in perfect formation. Each vessel carried weapons that could crack moons and defensive shields that had never been penetrated by enemy fire. The Chronal Admiral felt confident as he surveyed his forces. 3 civilizations had contributed their best warships to this operation. The angular black vessels of the Scythic Confederation moved alongside the organic curves of Vorthon Republic ships. All were unified under his command for this simple operation, the conquest of one primitive world inhabited by 7 billion humans. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, a 4-eyed Scythic named Vorhan, "our scouts have completed their survey of the system. The humans have detected our approach and appear to be responding." Kethmore's mandibles clicked in amusement. Responding how? Are they attempting to communicate? Perhaps they wish to surrender before we begin? Not exactly, sir, Vorhan replied, uncertainty creeping into his voice. They appear to be mobilizing every military asset on their planet. Every nuclear weapon, every orbital platform, every spacecraft capable of flight is being launched toward our fleet. The Admiral's amusement grew. How charmingly futile. Their most powerful weapons are nuclear devices, correct? Our ship shields can withstand direct contact with stellar coronas. Their primitive explosives will be like raindrops against our hulls. On the main display, thousands of small contacts began appearing as they departed Earth's gravity well. Missiles, spacecraft, even what appeared to be converted cargo vessels accelerated toward the alien fleet. The humans were throwing everything they had at an enemy they could not possibly defeat. "Sir," reported another officer, this one a Vorthon with blue crystalline skin, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from some of their projectiles. They appear to have strapped their orbital mining equipment to chemical rockets and accelerated it to near light speed." Kethmore paused. That was actually somewhat clever, though still pointless against their advanced defenses. Any projectile moving at significant velocity can cause damage through kinetic force alone. But our shields will handle it. Begin defensive procedures. The first wave of human attacks reached the alien fleet 15 minutes later. Nuclear explosions bloomed against energy shields like small suns, causing no damage but creating spectacular light displays. Kinetic projectiles struck defensive barriers and shattered into fragments. The human assault was exactly what Kethmore had expected. Primitive, desperate, and completely ineffective. "Human casualties?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be operating all weapons remotely or with volunteer crews. No surrender signals detected." That was slightly unusual. Most species, when faced with the obvious superiority of galactic technology, would cease their attacks and attempt to negotiate. But humans seemed determined to continue their futile assault. The real surprise came when Kethmore's forces began landing operations on the human homeworld. The Admiral expected quick capitulation once his ground forces demonstrated their overwhelming technological advantage. Instead, his troops found themselves fighting for every meter of territory against an enemy that refused to acknowledge the concept of a hopeless situation. "Sir," reported Ground Commander Thexival from the surface, "the humans have turned their entire planet into a fortress. Every building has been prepared for defense, every intersection has been trapped. Every civilian appears to be a potential combatant." "Surely you exaggerate," Kethmore replied from orbit. "I do not, sir. We just took a human structure they call a shopping mall. It required 6 hours of combat and cost us 47 casualties. The humans had converted children's toy stores into weapons workshops, food preparation areas into chemical laboratories, and clothing stores into camouflaged fighting positions. Every human inside fought to the death." Kethmore frowned. 47 casualties to take one civilian building? That was unacceptable. Perhaps they are defending their government centers or military installations. "No, sir. This was a civilian commercial area, and when our forces finally secured it, the humans detonated explosives that brought down the entire structure. They buried themselves and 12 of our soldiers rather than allow us to use the facility. Reports from other landing sites told similar stories. Human forces did not fight like any species in galactic military databases. They used tactics that made no sense from a strategic perspective, but proved devastatingly effective in practice. They poisoned their own water supplies to deny them to alien forces. They collapsed their own tunnels and bridges to slow alien advances. They converted civilian vehicles into explosive devices and drove them directly at alien positions. Most disturbing of all, they used psychological warfare techniques that left even veteran chronal warriors shaken. Humans would broadcast recordings of alien casualties over loudspeakers. They would leave messages written in alien languages that detailed exactly how they planned to kill specific enemy units. They would play human music at volumes that could be heard for miles, especially recordings that humans called death metal and war songs. Admiral Ground Commander Thexeville reported after 3 days of urban combat. "I need to inform you of something unprecedented. The humans have been capturing our wounded soldiers. For interrogation purposes? No, sir. For medical treatment. They have been providing medical care to our injured personnel and then releasing them back to our lines with messages." Kethmore's confusion deepened. "What kind of messages?" "The messages are philosophical in nature, sir. They contain questions about why we are fighting, what we hope to achieve, and whether our governments told us the truth about human capabilities and intentions. Some of our soldiers have been asking similar questions. This was completely outside normal military protocols. Enemy species were supposed to either surrender or fight until defeated. They were not supposed to engage in philosophical discussions with invading forces. Furthermore, Thexville continued, our intelligence indicates that human resistance is actually growing stronger, not weaker. They appear to have connected their global communication network in ways we cannot disrupt. Every time we capture a position, they coordinate responses from areas we have not yet reached. It is as if their entire species is functioning as a single military unit. Admiral Kethmore realized that the operation was not proceeding as planned. His forces controlled orbital space completely and had landed successfully on every continent. But instead of the quick victory he had expected, his troops were engaged in grinding urban warfare against an enemy that seemed to view death as preferable to surrender. "Request reinforcements from the coalition," he ordered, "and inform them that our initial estimates may have been optimistic." As if responding to his words, alarms began sounding throughout the flagship. "Admiral," called the tactical officer, "we have multiple human spacecraft approaching from the outer system. They appear to be converted civilian vessels, but they're moving at attack speed." On the main display, dozens of human ships approached the alien fleet. They were crude makeshift vessels, cargo haulers fitted with weapons, passenger ships converted into bombers, even what appeared to be a luxury yacht with missile launchers strapped to its hull. "They cannot seriously believe they can damage our vessels with such primitive craft," Kethmore muttered. The human ships did not attempt to engage in traditional combat. Instead, they flew directly at the alien vessels, detonating themselves against shields and hulls in coordinated suicide attacks. Each explosion caused minimal damage, but the cumulative effect was beginning to strain defensive systems. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "the humans are not attempting to win through superior firepower. They appear to be trying to exhaust our defensive capabilities through sheer persistence." Admiral Kethmore watched the display with growing unease. This was not how civilized warfare was conducted. Species were supposed to calculate their chances, recognize superior force, and either negotiate or surrender. They were not supposed to throw themselves into certain death simply to prove a point. "How long can our shields withstand this type of assault?" he asked. "Indefinitely, sir, assuming they maintain current attack rates. But if they continue to escalate..." Another wave of human suicide craft approached, these ones larger and moving faster. The Admiral realized with growing horror that the humans were not just throwing away their lives randomly. They were learning from each attack, improving their tactics, finding ways to strain alien defenses even with their primitive technology. Open a communication channel to the human leadership, Kethmore ordered. Sir, we have been attempting to establish communication since the operation began. The humans respond to every request for surrender with the same message, which is? 2 words, sir. In various human languages, but always the same meaning. They say no, and then they use a profanity that roughly translates as, have intercourse with yourself. Admiral Kethmore stared at the tactical display showing the positions of his forces on the human world below. His troops controlled Major, deep beneath the Himalayan mountains in a facility that had not existed 6 months earlier. Dr. Sarah Chen worked without sleep for the 3rd consecutive day. Around her, the brightest minds of humanity bent over workbenches covered with alien technology, their faces illuminated by the strange glow of captured equipment from 3 different species. The facility itself was a testament to human adaptability under pressure. What had once been a natural cave system had been expanded, reinforced, and converted into a research laboratory using nothing but hand tools and determination. Power came from a combination of stolen alien energy cells and jury-rigged human generators. Life support consisted of fans, filters, and the kind of improvised air recycling systems that humans seem to excel at creating. Sarah, called out Dr. James Harrison from across the cavern. I think I've figured out how their faster-than-light communication works. Chen looked up from her own work, which involved attempting to understand the crystalline structure of Vexani technology. Her eyes were red with exhaustion, but her mind remained sharp with the kind of focus that only came from knowing that failure meant the extinction of her species. Show me, she said, walking over to Harrison's workbench. Harrison held up a device that looked like a cross between a human radio and an alien crystal formation. The Sithek use quantum entanglement on a macro scale. They've somehow figured out how to entangle large crystal matrices and use them for instantaneous communication across any distance. That should be impossible according to our understanding of physics, Chen replied. Exactly, which means our understanding is incomplete. But here's the interesting part. Their technology is incredibly sophisticated, but it's also completely standardized. Every Sithek communication device we've captured uses exactly the same design, the same frequencies, the same encryption protocols. Chen began to see the implications. They've had this technology for so long that they've stopped innovating. It's become routine for them. Right. And that gives us an advantage. Our technology is primitive, but it's flexible. We've had to improvise and adapt for our entire history. They've been using the same basic designs for thousands of years. Around the facility, other research teams were making similar discoveries. The Chronal Empire's weapons were devastatingly powerful, but followed predictable patterns. The Vorthan Republic's energy shields operated on frequencies that could be mapped and potentially countered. Each alien species had developed incredibly advanced technology, but they had also become locked into specific ways of thinking about problems. Dr. Elena Vasquez, working on captured Chronal weapons, called out her own findings. Their plasma weapons are amazing, but they're designed for fighting other species with similar technology. They're not optimized for fighting enemies who don't follow standard galactic military doctrine. What do you mean? Chen asked. Look at this, Vasquez said, activating a holographic display. Chronal battle tactics assume that enemies will use shields, deploy in standard formations, and follow predictable attack patterns. Their weapons are incredibly effective against energy barriers and armored vehicles, but they're actually less effective against scattered infantry using cover and concealment. Chen realized what Vasquez was suggesting. They've spent thousands of years fighting civilized wars against civilized opponents. They've never had to deal with guerrilla tactics, suicide attacks, or enemies who refuse to follow military conventions. Exactly. And that means we can use their own sophistication against them. The research continued around the clock. Human engineers worked to reverse engineer alien technology, while human psychologists studied captured enemy personnel. What they discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The alien species were incredibly advanced, but also incredibly predictable. The Chronal Empire operated on strict military hierarchy. Orders flowed down from commanders to subordinates without question or deviation. This made them efficient in conventional warfare, but vulnerable to tactics that disrupted their command structure. The Sithek Confederation functioned as a collective intelligence, with individual thoughts contributing to group decisions. This made them excellent at coordination, but poor at adapting to rapidly changing situations that required individual initiative. The Vorthan Republic was a civilization of specialists, with each individual trained for specific roles and functions. They were incredibly competent within their areas of expertise, but struggled when forced to operate outside their designated specializations. They fight wars of conquest, Chen explained to the assembled resistance leaders during one of their underground briefings. They expect to demonstrate superior firepower, accept the enemy's surrender, and then impose their governmental structures on the conquered population. They've never fought a war of extinction. General Patricia Morrison, one of the few surviving, high-ranking military officers, leaned forward in her chair. "What exactly are you saying, Dr. Chen?" "I'm saying that we're fighting a type of war that they don't understand. They expect us to surrender when the situation becomes hopeless. They expect us to preserve our population and infrastructure. They expect us to value survival over freedom. None of those expectations are correct." Around the briefing room, resistance leaders from every continent nodded in understanding. They had seen the reports from occupied territories. Humans were not surrendering or collaborating. Instead, they were continuing to resist even when resistance meant certain death. "Furthermore," Chen continued, "we've discovered something about their psychology that we can use. They're not used to fighting enemies who convert their own prisoners of war." This was perhaps the most unexpected development of the entire conflict. When humans were captured, instead of being broken by interrogation, they began talking to their captors. They shared human art, music, literature, and philosophy. They asked questions about alien society and government. They planted seeds of doubt about the righteousness of the invasion. The effect on alien morale was unprecedented. Chronal soldiers began questioning orders for the first time in their species' history. Scythic collective decision-making processes became disrupted by individuals who had been exposed to human concepts of individual rights. Vorthon specialists began wondering about roles and responsibilities outside their assigned functions. Most importantly, Chen said, activating a display that showed a map of Earth's communication networks, "We've turned our entire global infrastructure into a weapon of war." The display showed how human resistance movements had connected using existing internet cables, satellite networks, radio systems, and even old-fashioned telephone lines. The aliens could destroy individual communication nodes, but they could not shut down the entire system without destroying the infrastructure they needed to govern conquered territory. "Every human with a smartphone is part of our intelligence network," Chen explained. "Every internet connection is a potential command center. Every radio frequency is a possible coordination channel. The aliens are trying to occupy and control a planet where 7 billion people are connected to each other through multiple redundant systems." General Morrison smiled grimly. "So we've turned our own civilization into a distributed resistance network." "Exactly. And that brings me to the next phase of our response." Chen activated another display, this one showing spacecraft under construction in hidden facilities around the world. The ships looked like nothing any human had ever built before, strange combinations of human engineering and alien technology, held together by improvisation and determination. "We've been building these in secret for the past 4 months," Chen said. "They're not beautiful, and they're not perfect, but they're functional. More importantly, they're completely unlike anything the aliens expect to encounter." The ships were indeed ugly. They looked like cargo containers fitted with alien engines, passenger aircraft equipped with energy weapons, and construction equipment converted for space combat. But they represented something that no alien species had seen in thousands of years: rapid technological evolution under pressure. "How many do we have?" Morrison asked. 47 vessels capable of interplanetary flight, each one different from the others because each one was built by different teams using different combinations of captured technology. The aliens won't be able to predict their capabilities. Because we don't know their capabilities ourselves until we test them in combat. Chen paused and looked around the room at the faces of humanity's survivors. They were tired, frightened, and facing impossible odds. But they were also united in a way that their species had never been before. The aliens made one crucial mistake when they invaded Earth, Chen said quietly. They assumed that because we hadn't unified as a species before, we couldn't unify under pressure. They were wrong. Every human on this planet now understands that we're fighting for the right to exist as a free species. There are no political parties anymore, no national boundaries, no religious divisions. There are only humans and the aliens who want to control us. General Morrison stood up. When do we launch the counterattack? Chen looked at the display showing the hidden fleet. The ships will be ready in 2 weeks. The question is whether we're ready to take this war to their home systems. What do you mean? Morrison asked. Captain Maria Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the converted cargo hauler Indomitable and watched the Chronol home system appear on her display screens. Around her ship, 46 other human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel in formations that would have made any military academy instructor weep. The ships looked like they had been assembled in someone's garage, which in many cases was literally true. The Indomitable itself had started life as a container transport designed to carry goods between space stations. Now it bristled with alien weapons systems, human-designed armor plating, and communication arrays that shouldn't have been compatible with anything else on the ship. The fact that it worked at all was a testament to human stubbornness and the kind of engineering that came from having no choice but to succeed. Captain, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communication station, we're receiving multiple signals from Chronol Defense Forces. They seem confused. Rodriguez almost smiled. She could understand their confusion. No enemy fleet had ever appeared in the Chronol home system in over 5,000 years of recorded history. The very idea that primitive humans could have traveled this far from their own world probably seemed impossible to them. Open a channel to the Chronol fleet, Rodriguez ordered. On the main display, the face of Admiral Zethkar appeared. The Chronol commander looked exactly like what Earth's resistance intelligence had told her to expect. 10 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating, with 4 arms and mandibles designed for crushing enemy bones. He looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares. Unknown vessels, Admiral Zethkar spoke in translated Galactic Standard. You are in violation of Chronol territorial space. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. This is Captain Maria Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force, she replied, calmly. We represent the human species of Earth. You have 48 hours to withdraw all Chronol forces from our system, or we will demonstrate why the Galactic Council tried to warn you about us. Admiral Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what Rodriguez's cultural briefings had told her was amusement. Captain Rodriguez, your bravery is admirable but pointless. You command fewer than 50 primitive vessels against the home fleet of the Chronol Empire. Surrender now and your crews will be treated with the dignity appropriate for such a desperate but courageous act. Admiral, Rodriguez replied, you're making the same mistake your invasion force made 18 months ago. You're assuming that we fight wars the way you do. She cut the communication channel and turned to her crew. All ships implement Plan Omega. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come, though most species would conclude that the human tactics were too insane to be practical for civilized warfare. The human fleet did not engage the Chronol forces in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they released thousands of small objects that appeared to be debris or abandoned equipment. The Chronol sensors dismissed them as harmless junk ejected from the primitive human vessels. The objects were actually self-replicating nanobots, designed by human engineers who had reverse-engineered Vexani crystal technology and combined it with Earth's most advanced computer programming. Each nanobot was programmed to seek out specific alien ship systems, reproduce itself using materials from the target vessel, and then begin systematically dismantling enemy ships from the inside out. The Chronol fleet's first indication that something was wrong came when their flagship's artificial gravity failed. Then their life support systems began shutting down. Then their weapons stopped responding to commands. Within 6 hours, Every Chronol vessel in the system was dead in space, their crews trapped in powerless metal coffins. "Admiral Zethkar," Rodriguez called over the communication channel, "this is what we call asymmetric warfare. Your ships are designed to fight other ships with similar technology. Our nanobots are designed to eat your ships from the inside. Would you like to discuss surrender terms?" But the real shock was yet to come. As the Chronol home fleet floated helplessly in space, the human vessels began broadcasting on every frequency, every communication channel, every information network in the system. They transmitted a complete intelligence dump of every piece of information they had gathered about the Galactic Coalition forces. The broadcasts included detailed evidence of war crimes committed against humans and other species. They contained records of lies told to justify the invasion. They included communications between coalition leaders discussing how to divide up human territory and resources. Most damaging of all, they included recordings of coalition officials laughing about human casualties and dismissing human culture as primitive and worthless. The broadcasts reached not just Chronol military personnel, but ordinary Chronol civilians, who had never been told the true reasons for the war. For the first time in their history, average citizens learned what their government was doing in their name. The effect was immediate and devastating. Protests broke out in major Chronol cities. Military units began refusing orders. Regional governors started declaring independence from the Central Empire. Within days, the Chronol Empire was experiencing its first civil war in 3,000 years. Similar broadcasts reached the Sithek Confederation and the Vorthon Republic. The carefully maintained information controls that had kept their populations, ignorant of government actions, began to crumble under the weight of documented evidence. But Captain Rodriguez was not finished. The human fleet moved toward the Chronol homeworld, but instead of beginning orbital bombardment as any civilized species would have done, they began something entirely different: cultural warfare. "Attention citizens of the Chronol Empire," Rodriguez broadcast to the planet below. "We are not here to conquer you or destroy your civilization. We are here to offer you something your government has never given you: a choice." The humans began transmitting Earth's entire cultural database: music, art, literature, philosophy, science, and most importantly, political theory. They broadcast the concepts of individual rights, democratic government, and the idea that people should be able to choose their own leaders. To a species that had lived under military dictatorship for their entire recorded history, these ideas were revolutionary, in the most literal sense. The broadcasts included practical information about how to organize peaceful protests, how to communicate securely with other dissidents, and how to resist government oppression without resorting to violence. Admiral Zethkar, now commanding a fleet that could barely maintain life support, watched his civilization tear itself apart from within. "What manner of species are you?" he asked during surrender negotiations. Captain Rodriguez looked at him through the communication screen. "We're the kind that refuses to accept that things have to stay the way they are, Admiral. Your empire has existed unchanged for 5,000 years. That ends today." The surrender ceremony took place aboard the Indomitable, in what had once been a cargo bay and now served as the ship's main meeting room. Admiral Zethkar sat across a metal table from Captain Rodriguez, his forearms folded in defeat. "You could have simply destroyed our fleet and bombed our cities from orbit," Zethkar said. "That is what any civilized species would have done. Why did you choose this complicated approach?" Rodriguez considered the question carefully. "Because destruction is easy, Admiral. Any species with sufficient firepower can destroy their enemies. But we didn't come here to destroy the Chronol Empire. We came here to prove that humanity cannot be conquered by anyone, ever, for any reason." "And you have proven that," Zethkar admitted. "But at what cost? You have introduced chaos into our society. Our people are questioning everything they have ever been taught about government, about authority, about their place in the galaxy." "Good," Rodriguez replied simply. "Questions are the beginning of progress." She stood and walked to a viewing port that showed the Chronol homeworld below. Across the planet's surface, lights flickered in patterns that indicated massive social upheaval. Cities that had remained unchanged for millennia were experiencing demonstrations, celebrations, and the kind of chaotic energy that came with rapid social change. Your species has had the same government for 5,000 years, Rodriguez continued. The same social structure, the same way of thinking about problems, the same approach to dealing with other species. That kind of stability might seem desirable, but it also means you've stopped growing. Admiral Zethkar looked confused. Growing? Our empire spans dozens of star systems. Our population numbers in the trillions. How have we not grown? Rodriguez turned back to face him. Because you've spent 5,000 years doing the same things in the same ways. You've become so focused on maintaining your existing power structure that you've forgotten how to adapt to new situations. That's why you couldn't defeat humanity despite having vastly superior technology. The Admiral's mandibles clicked slowly as he processed this concept. And you believe that this chaos you have introduced will somehow benefit our species? I believe that your species deserves the chance to choose their own future, just like every other sapient species in the galaxy. What they do with that, chance is up to them. Rodriguez paused and looked at the surrender documents on the table. The Galactic Council chamber looked very different than it had 18 months earlier. The same crystal floors stretched across 3 miles, and the same atmospheric system supported 47 different species in their preferred environments. But the species themselves had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Ambassador Zechtar stood at the central podium again, but this time he was not alone. Beside him stood Dr. Sarah Chen, representing humanity in the Galactic Council, for the first time in their species' history. She looked small compared to most of the other delegates, but her presence changed the entire dynamic of the chamber. The Chronal Empire's delegation consisted of 3 different representatives, from 3 different factions, each claiming to speak for their portion of what had once been a unified government. The Scythec Confederation had split into 5 separate groups, each pursuing different approaches to the concept of individual rights that humans had introduced to their collective consciousness. The Vorthan Republic had become an actual republic, with elected representatives instead of appointed specialists. Honored delegates, Zechtar began, his forearms gesturing toward displays that showed the current state of galactic civilization. I stand before you to present my final report on the human species and the consequences of our decision to disregard the Council's original recommendation. The displays showed star maps that would have been incomprehensible to the Council members just 2 years earlier. Traditional territorial boundaries had dissolved or shifted dramatically. Species that had maintained the same governmental structures for thousands of years were experiencing rapid political evolution. Trade routes that had remained stable for millennia were being renegotiated as new political entities emerged. The political landscape of our galaxy has fundamentally changed, Zechtar continued. The Hegemony Coalition, which initiated the invasion of human space, has completely dissolved. The Chronal Empire is engaged in what they call a peaceful transition to representative government, though the process involves considerable debate and occasional violence. The Scythec Confederation has become 5 separate nations, each experimenting with different combinations of collective decision-making and individual rights. Dr. Chen stepped forward to address the council. Unlike the other delegates, she did not use translation devices or atmospheric modification equipment. She spoke in Galactic Standard, which she had learned during the long journey to the council chambers. Honored delegates, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber. I want to begin by acknowledging the tremendous changes that have occurred throughout your civilizations. These changes were not our intention when we defended our homeworld. We simply chose not to surrender. The crystalline Vexani chimed their curiosity through harmonic vibrations. Dr. Chen, your species has introduced concepts to our galaxy that have disrupted social structures spanning millions of years. Did you not foresee these consequences? Chen considered the question carefully. We understood that our resistance would have effects beyond our own system. But no, we did not predict the specific changes that have occurred. We were focused on survival, not on galactic revolution. Senator Vexani Prime's harmonic translations carried notes of confusion. Yet, Your broadcast during the conflict specifically included political theory and organizational techniques designed to promote social change. That's correct, Chen replied. We shared our knowledge because we believe that every sapient species has the right to choose their own form of government. We did not force anyone to adopt our ideas. We simply made the information available. The ancient Lumhari spoke, their words appearing as patterns of light translated for the other delegates. The humans have accomplished something unprecedented. They have triggered voluntary political evolution across multiple species simultaneously. This is not conquest in any traditional sense. Ambassador Zektar activated another display, this one showing economic and social statistics from across the galaxy. The changes extend far beyond politics. Trade between species has increased by 340% as new governments establish different relationships with their neighbors. Scientific collaboration has expanded dramatically as species begin sharing information more freely. Cultural exchange has reached levels not seen in galactic history. But, interrupted Commander Thakris of what remained of the Chronal military, there has also been instability, conflict, and uncertainty. Billions of sapient beings are experiencing social upheaval. Some of them are suffering. Dr. Chen nodded soberly. Change is never without cost, Commander. But the question is whether the cost of change is greater or lesser than the cost of remaining unchanged. Your species spent 5,000 years under military dictatorship. Was that stability worth the price of never allowing your people to choose their own leaders? Commander Thakris was quiet for a long moment. I have spent my entire life serving the Empire without question. These concepts you have introduced, they are difficult for someone like me to understand. I know. Chen replied gently. My species went through similar struggles over thousands of years of our own history. The transition from authoritarian government to democratic government is never easy, and it doesn't always succeed on the first attempt. The Mirthul representative released bubbles of concern into their aquatic environment. Dr. Chen, what assurance can you give us that these changes will lead to positive outcomes? What if some species are unable to adapt to these new concepts? I can give you no such assurance, Chen said honestly. Democracy and individual rights are not guarantees of success. They are only guarantees of the opportunity to succeed or fail based on your own choices. Some of your species may decide that these concepts are not appropriate for your cultures. That decision is yours to make. Ambassador Zektar spoke again, which brings us to the most significant consequence of all. Dr. Chen, your species has not simply defended itself against invasion. You have accidentally introduced a concept that is spreading throughout galactic civilization, like what humans call a virus. What concept is that? Chen asked. The concept of saying no. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered this statement. For millions of years, galactic civilization had been built on hierarchical structures where authority flowed from higher levels to lower levels without question. Species that achieved interstellar travel were expected to accept their place in existing power structures. Newer species deferred to older ones. Smaller civilizations accepted guidance from larger ones. Military forces followed orders without debate. Every species in this chamber understood the word no in their own language, Zektar continued. But they had forgotten how to use it when dealing with authority figures. Your species has reminded the galaxy that no is always an option. Doctor. Chen looked around the chamber at the faces of delegates from dozens of different species. Some looked worried, others appeared excited, and many seemed confused. All of them were grappling with ideas that had been dormant in their cultures for thousands of years. The humans have taught us something that we had forgotten, spoke Elder Mirthul through bubbles that translated as words. They have shown us that authority must be justified, not simply accepted. But this creates chaos, protested a Vorthon representative. If every individual believes they can question authority, how do we maintain social order? Chen smiled. The same way my species learned to maintain social order, through negotiation, compromise, and the consent of the governed. It's messier than authoritarian systems, and it's slower, but it's also more adaptable. Commander Thakris stood up, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. Dr. Chen, I have a question that troubles me. Your species defended itself with remarkable effectiveness, but you also showed mercy to defeated enemies. You could have destroyed the Chronal homeworld, but instead you helped us transition to a new form of government. Why? Chen considered the question. Because destruction would have proven only that we could fight. By helping you transition to self-governance, we proved something much more important, that we were fighting for principles, not just for survival. What principles? The principle that every sapient species has the right to exist free from external control. The principle that governments derive their authority from the consent of the governed. The principle that individuals should be able to choose their own destinies. The Lumhari's light patterns shifted to indicate deep thought. These principles apply to all species, not just humanity. Of course, Chen replied. Universal principles are universal. They apply to everyone, or they apply to no one. Ambassador Zektar made his final statement to the council. Honorable delegates, my recommendation today is the same as it was 18 months ago, but for different reasons. I recommend that we treat humanity with extreme caution. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. Not because they are dangerous in the traditional sense, Zektar clarified, but because they are dangerous to the concept of unchanging authority. They have introduced ideas that question the fundamental assumptions upon which our civilizations have been built for millions of years. He paused and looked directly at Dr. Chen. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is not a planet killer or a fleet of starships. The most